about the building of the Mishkan. V'yidaber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yichu li truma. V'yichu li. They should take on my behalf truma. Truma is the tithing. Why does it say v'yitnu li truma? Right, it's the obvious question. You should give me truma. You should take from me truma. What's the giving? So without getting involved in, just on a very simple level, vehicle means that when everyone tithes, you're taking from something. You have untithed grain, untithed produce. You take from it, and once you've taken, it becomes truma. Then you give it to the Kohen. Here we're talking about the Jews have enormous wealth that they took out of Egypt. Anyway, whereas Chazal say that the Bizes Hayam, the spoils of the sea, from that wealth which surpassed the spoils of Egypt, that wealth was designated for the building of the Mishkan. So me take of that wealth on my behalf and set it aside for the Mishkan. So where are you taking? You're taking it from what you have, as you normally tithe something, on my behalf for the Mishkan. So therefore it's vikuli. You're taking for me. So Rashi says, it says v'yichul truma. What's v'yichul li truma? Li lishmi. You should take for me, on my behalf. When you take it, it's not when you give it, you should give it for me. Even from the moment you tithe it, you're tithing it for me. So that it's very interesting. When a person takes truma, a person has untithed grain, untithed produce. You only have to have in mind to take truma. I'm taking the portion which I have to take, otherwise the grain, the produce is not permitted to me. You don't have to have anything specifically in mind. I'm taking it on behalf of the Kohen, I'm taking truma. So if God says take truma, what do you need to take it on my behalf? By the Kohen, you don't have to have in mind, I'm taking it on behalf of the Kohen. When you tithe untithed grain or untithed produce, tithing for truma, it's truma. It becomes that portion which becomes the Kohen's. But yet, regarding the Mishkan, Hashem says, v'yichu li. You should take it on my behalf. And Rashi makes it a point. That's the other word to say, v'yichu truma. So I think the difference is, what is the status of tevel? Untithed grain, untithed produce. You're not permitted to benefit from it. So it already is, there's something about it which has within it, which does not allow you to partake of it. So even though the halacha is if a person would, let's say, marry a woman with tevel, she's mekudeshes, because monetarily the untithed grain, untithed produce is yours. But factually speaking, it's not permitted. It's only a nisar achila. But there's nisar achila. You're not permitted to eat from it. But let's say, monetarily speaking, it's yours. Over here, the spoils of the sea, everything is yours. You're permitted to partake from everything. So over here, the taking on my behalf is the equivalent of a consecration. You're consecrating it. How does it become mine? It's only because you're taking it on my behalf. By taking on my behalf, that's how it becomes mine. By the truma, tevel, you're not permitted to benefit from. As a result of that, it's only, therefore, it's sufficient just to take it for it to be truma. And that permits what remains. Here, everything's permitted. So here, it's the designation which causes it to become truma. Therefore, it's v'yichuli, you must take it on my behalf. From the time, therefore, the tithing has to be behalf of Hashem. That's the simple understanding. Why it's v'yichuli lishmi. But you could say even more than that. That what's the concept of consecration? I once said that normally, we're dealing with transfer of ownership. To transfer ownership from one party to another, one needs an active acquisition. We have many instruments of transfer, whether it's a document, whether it's taking possession, whether it's giving money, but you need some kind of instrument of transfer. When one consecrates something, one doesn't need an instrument of transfer. Gemara says that just the verbal consecration is enough to transfer it from the ordinary domain into God's domain. Correct? You say this animal should be whatever it is, should be a shlomim, a peace offering, sin offering, whatever it may be. This table should be consecrated for Hashem. Once you say that, you're not permitted to benefit from the table because it's been designated for Hashem. Why between two individuals you need an instrument of transfer? And otherwise, if I say this table should be whoever it may be, it's not his until we do some kind of instrument of transfer or the person takes possession. But regarding consecration, all you have to say is it should be whatever it may be. It should be consecrated, it becomes consecrated. And there's a transfer into God's domain immediately. So I always mention there's a famous Meiri, that Meiri says that David Abel says in Tehillim, Lashem Aritzim Loa. The world in its entirety is God's. It's God's world. God says, you're permitted to partake of my world. Once you say, so therefore, as a result of that, basically everything's God. God is allowing us to partake of his. So therefore, all you have to say is, Hashem, let it remain yours. When you say, let it remain yours, it remains in Hashem's domain. When you deal with two individuals, it's in one person's domain, and he wants to transfer it to the other person's domain. So until the other person has no relevance to that object that you're transferring. Therefore, without an instrument of transfer, it's not possible to transfer the domain A to domain B. But in terms of consecration, where everything is God's, all you're saying, it's a release. You're releasing it back to what? To the one who's the benefactor, who's the one who really is in full possession of what it is. Therefore, in regard to what we call hegdish, consecration, verbal consecration is sufficient. And that's why the Gemara says, that the verbal statement to Hashem is the equivalent of what? Of transferring it to an ordinary person. V'yikhuli truma. Everything here is yours at this point. V'yikhuli, when you take it, you must tithe it on my behalf. Because this is consecration. This is not tithing something which already is not permitted to you. Something that's not permitted, when you tithe it, that becomes the truma, or becomes whatever it may be. Here, everything is yours. Here, it's designating a portion for Hashem. Therefore, it's yikhuli, you should take it lishmi. What is the whole value of the Mishkan? That is the location through which we have that relationship. Only because this Torah mem, because there was a Torah given in over a 40-day period, that was the catalyst, or that was what allowed us to mesh with Hashem. As the famous Zohar, Yisrael v'Oraisa v'Kutshim Chatu. The Jewish people, the Torah and God were all one. Chadu. What is the medium through which we actually connect to Hashem? How do we connect? How we dovik to Hashem? Person feels inspired. A person feels he wants to be attached to God. That doesn't attach you. What created the connection was the Torah that was given at Sinai. So it's Truma is Torah Mem. The Torah that was given over a 40-day period. Moshe Rabbeinu was in heaven 40 days and 40 nights. And he came down with the Luchos Rishonos, with the first set of tablets. That was the binding moment. So why do we speak about Vosli Midrash V'Shachanti B'Socham? Why does God dwell in our midst? The reason why we have relevance that God should dwell in our midst is only because of Torah Mem. Therefore, it's V'Yikhuli Truma. Therefore, I want you to tithe from your wealth. This tithing, to have that relationship, that intimate relationship, because Truma is Torah Mem. That's the reason.